because I always leave the audio on for some reason on this YouTube thing. And I don't know. We are live, though. Hello, if anybody's joining us. Waiting for it to start up on YouTube so I can go ahead and hit this pause button. Just refresh.
Back on.
Anybody's joining us. There we go. Okay. Do I sound good, Jen? Because I was listening to last week and I sounded a little like I was in a warehouse almost.
You do not sound like that this week.
All right, cool. Once again, if you're joining us, feel free to ask questions in the chat, but we will get to them at the end of the show. If you do have any questions for us, if you have any last-minute waiver questions or anything like that, just let us know in the chat. And thank you so much for joining us on this recording of episode 66 of the TFA Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about a number of things regarding Week 6 and looking ahead at Week 7. Kev has another rant he wants to do, so that should be interesting. His camera is back, so that's good. Let's kind of get into it, though, guys. Let's get the podcast started so we can, do it. That thing that we do with the microphones and the cameras. Oh, wait, I got to close my door. 1 second. Talking football.
Talking football.
All right. Are we ready?
Let's do it.
We look a little ready. All right. I'm not ready. All right. 3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the Fantasy Authority Podcast, brought to you by thefantasyauthority.com. I, of course, am your host, Anthony Penzone. Alongside me, our gurus, our GMs, our Kansas City Chief and Pittsburgh Steeler lovers, Kevin Steele and Jennifer Smith. How we doing today, guys?
Doing good. Glad to be back. I haven't been on the show for a couple of weeks, so I'm excited. Be back talking some football with my guys.
Good to have you back. I saw on the Twitter chat that you absolutely killed it in your race this past weekend. So good for you, man. I tell you, I'm proud of you because I don't think I could do that. Actually, I know I couldn't do that. So good on you, man. You trained for a long time for that. So good job.
Thank you. Yeah, 3.5 months of training. So it was great. And thanks for all the support on Twitter. You guys have been amazing. So I know I couldn't give out advice this weekend, but I'm sure you got great advice from the rest of the TFA folks. So I'll be back this weekend for sure.
And Kevin's back with us as always. He said last week that he would don the Raiders symbol as his Twitter avatar if the Raiders beat the Chiefs. Of course, that did not come close to happening. He was correct in his assumption that the Chiefs were going to go ahead into Oakland and beat down the Raiders, and that they did. How you feeling today, Kev?
I feel great to watch that, but, in one of my fantasy leagues, my keeper league that I've talked about on here before, it is a standard league, and I scored 150 points, and I lost. And it wasn't even close. I lost by 23 points. The guy scored 173. He had Breeze, McCoy, Lamar Miller, and Kenny Britt. And I couldn't believe it. I'm just like, this is unreal. Like, my team is having, a monster day in its own right, and it wasn't even close. And then, I am leading the league in points scored on the year, and it's not even close. I'm the only one that's at 700. I'm at 740 points scored. But I've had 730 points scored against me.
Holy crap.
Yeah, so every week I'm playing the people who have the monster weeks. And so I'm 3-3. There's no way my team should be 3-3, not even close. But I still feel fine. My team is elite. So I'll be okay. Just one of those things with fantasy.
People come to play when they play against you, man. That's for sure.
Well, yeah. I mean, when you have Stafford and then David Johnson and Kristen Michael and then Antonio Brown, Julio Jones, Allen Robinson, Kelvin Benjamin, you should win every week. And then, I got guys like, Jeremy Hill, who sucked, but I got Jerick McKinnon and Tevin Coleman. And I just had an embarrassment of riches. And, yeah, So I feel pretty good. And this is a 12-team league. It's just a keeper league, so I've done pretty well there. But, yeah.
I'm feeling pretty awesome myself tonight. My Miami Dolphins got it done this past weekend, beating the Pittsburgh Steelers at home. I'm so sorry, Jen. I know it was at the expense of your team, but this was the first time I've actually seen any signs of life in this Dolphins team. So it was very much a relief to me that I was not going to have to endure another 2-14 season or 1-15 season, because they at least showed that they can probably win 5 games.
Yeah, I don't know though, man. Because I'm not trying to rain on anybody's parade here, but that's the Steelers. That's what they do. Like, they have games like this every year where they just you're like, huh? Like, how did this even happen? They're not nearly as good on the road as they are at home, and I think a lot of people really felt like this was going to happen, but you just didn't want to go all in on it because it was playing the Dolphins. But as it was happening, it wasn't surprising one bit to see it happen, because I don't know what it is with the Steelers on the road. They just don't play as well as they do at home, and it really shows. And now, obviously, Big Ben, that's even worse. It's like rubbing salt in the wound there.
Mm.
It definitely is. I hope he doesn't miss a lot of time. I'm just hoping for a speedy recovery, because Landry Jones is just not going to do anybody right. He might help Bell, but
he's
everybody else is
bad.
just going to suffer. It's gonna be bad. He's everything that makes Ben elite and a great quarterback. Mobile, moves out of the pocket, can scramble, can throw it downfield, as a hell of an arm. Landry doesn't have any of that. So Coates, bench him in my book. Not that he might not even play because of his hand, and he'll be looking for Brown. I don't know if he can get it to him. So yeah, that's gonna be tough.
A fun fact, Antonio Brown has never caught a touchdown from a quarterback not named Ben Roethlisberger in his career.
That is an interesting stat. Believable stat. But
I don't know if
that's
interesting or sad. I'm not sure. I guess it's impressive, right? It shows they got some good camaraderie or something.
It's not like it's only been a game or two, Big Ben has missed some time over the last couple of years, so that probably spells more doom. Probably doesn't make you feel real good as an Antonio Brown owner right about now.
Mm-mm. And you probably spent your first round pick on him, as you should have. So that's going to hurt some teams for sure.
D'Angelo Williams might have a little rise in value, though. I guess we'll have to see. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about the biggest stories heading into Week 7. We're going to cover some streaming options. As per usual, we'll hook you guys up with some quarterback, tight end, and defensive streaming options. We're going to be talking best of the rest. We each have another player for you to look at who will probably not be picked up during waivers and will be available for you after the fact, and you should consider nabbing. We also have 2 new ideas we kind of wanted to talk about here. They're not a weekly thing, but we wanted to bring it up in this episode. That's trends and breaking nonsensical ideas. So things such as you should play this position versus this team no matter what. Which of these situations are absolutely just based on reputation and not based on actual play this season? And then we're going to talk a little bit, if we have time, of 0 running back versus 0 wide receiver. How has each strategy stacked up against one another so far? So we got a lot to do, guys. Let's jump right into it. Biggest storylines heading into Week 7. We were just talking about the Steelers. We were just talking about Ben Roethlisberger. What on earth were we talking about? He's injured again. Torn meniscus, timetable unknown. We talked a little bit about how this affects the Steelers' offense. Antonio Brown has not caught a touchdown from a quarterback not named Ben Roethlisberger. Hopefully he will break that this time around. But how about Le'Veon Bell? How about Sammy Coates? How about D'Angelo Williams? Does the running back value go up here given the quarterback situation?
Yes and no.
I think it will increase their value. I think they'll rely on Bell.
I think it's tough mainly because I just don't know. I think now teams just aren't going to be for example, if they play New England, which we've sort of talked about this a couple weeks ago about the NFL, not they've kind of their ratings have been down and everything else. And before this injury, this had to be one that the NFL was just circling on the calendar, like, yes, Steelers versus Patriots, this is going to be amazing. And then Big Ben gets hurt, but I don't know against them. I think most teams are just going to scheme to be like, okay, Landry Jones, you're going to have to beat us, and they're going to stack the box. And I don't think anybody has any faith in Landry Jones that he's going to be able to hurt anybody. So do teams just stack the box? The good thing for Le'Veon Bell is he offers value outside of just he is a three down back, and if the team falls behind, which is entirely possible, especially if they're playing New England, then obviously he still holds value because he's so heavily involved in the passing game. So I don't know, but I just don't know if I would just I think yes. I don't know. I think it's tough. I don't know how much more value he has because it happens. I guess I should say that because he's already an elite level running back. So I mean, how much more do you expect from him? And like I said, if teams do stack the box similarly to what we see like out of the Rams, does that hurt Le'Veon Bell because now he doesn't have the space that he wants that he normally does?
About D'Angelo Williams, I mean, we talked about Bell a lot. They're going to be stacking the box. I'm sure the coaching staff will try to come up with creative ways to get Bell out in the flat or over the middle, simple little dump-off passes, stuff like that. D'Angelo Williams has been pretty much irrelevant since Bell came back, as expected. Does his value rise at all? Is he worth a flex spot?
No,
I don't.
for me.
No, I don't think it changes at all. You're still going to feed Le'Veon Bell. I don't think it provides more opportunity for D'Angelo Williams in any way. So,
fair enough. A team that's kind of been struggling, and it's been a bit of a surprise because we thought they were going to bounce back this year. They had their struggles last year without Jordy Nelson. We figured Jordy Nelson's back. Randall Cobb will get better. The Aaron Rodgers will start clicking again. And for a couple of games this year, that's been accurate. But not nearly as much as we expected. Aaron Rodgers struggled this past weekend yet again. Devontae Adams enters concussion protocol. Eddie Lacy expected to miss a couple weeks with an ankle injury. And James Starks was already out for a month. So what do the Packers do? They go and trade for Niall Davis with the Kansas City Chiefs. The question here is, can he become fantasy relevant? I think that's an absolute yes. It's just how fantasy relevant. Are we talking flex fantasy relevant? Or are we talking RB2, RB1? What are the expectations for Niall Davis, and do we expect this Packers offense to kind of bounce back a little bit? Don't everybody speak at once. We'll start with Jen.
Well, I wasn't really on the clearly Aaron Rodgers struggled this past week, but I wasn't really on the train that, or really considered him quote unquote struggling before this. That maybe, I guess I'm kind of wondering what these expectations were. At least fantasy wise, he scored at least 20 points in every game that he's played in, besides this last week. And I think the injury to Eddie Lacy is definitely concerning because the balance of the offense, but I think it just helps. I think Jordy Nelson, even though this past week, again, the production went down, I think they'll probably rely on him. Cobb has not stepped up. I don't know what needs to happen with him. I've been surprised by it, actually. I mean, I expected those two to bounce back just like they did 2 years ago and be one of the great wide receiver pairs this season, but he just can't seem to kind of get it together. So I'm worried less about Rodgers and more about kind of the offense clicking as a whole and what Niall Davis is going to be able to do in that scheme. I'm not really sure.
What do you think, Kev?
I think when it comes to Aaron Rodgers, I think the one thing that you sort of expect is for him to be I think on a week-to-week basis, I think we all expect for him to just blow up, and he really hasn't done that. He's had some good weeks for sure, but his best week coming, I believe, against the Lions, but the game was a little fluky because the Lions turned the ball over a ton in the first half, which led to easy scores for him. But he just hasn't looked the same. If you watch the games, I mean, he does not look right. And it shows, like, in his completion percentage. He's 26th in the league in his completion percentage right now, and that's completely not Aaron Rodgers-like. I mean, even today he admitted that that he's off and he's not. But I mean, nobody really knows what's going on with him. Sure, he's been a decent fantasy play. I mean, he still is a QB1, but he's not somebody every week when you're starting and you just feel like he's going to go out and just have a great game for you. I think he's kind of fallen into the next level for me of quarterbacks. I don't think I can put him in the elite category right now of quarterbacks. But the offense as a whole really just hasn't looked that great. And the running game hasn't been good. And as you mentioned, Randall Cobb has had a game and Jordy Nelson has had a game or two that he's looked good. But other than that, like, they have not looked like the explosive Green Bay Packer offense that we've come to expect. And then you mentioned, now with Eddie Lacy, the report came out from Ian Rappaport right before we came on that he's expected to miss several weeks. No answer yet of what the actual injury is going to be, but it's more than a sprained ankle that we originally thought, which begs the question of why in the hell did he even play last week, if that was even a question. But I digress. And then you have James Starks, who is now out for the next for at least a
4
month.
weeks. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so enter Nile Davis, who they traded for this morning. And I mean, I heard about this first I was probably one of the first ones to hear about it. And when I did, it really got me thinking about it. And to be honest, I actually think this is an excellent move for the Green Bay Packers. Nile Davis has proven that he can be productive in the NFL when given an opportunity. His problem mainly is he just was never a good fit in Andy Reid's offense. Andy Reid loves the 3-down back, the guy who can catch the ball out of the backfield. That never really suited Nile Davis's game. Nile Davis is a straight downhill runner, pretty similar to what a James Starks or Andy Lacy's asked to do in Green Bay. And there were reports this offseason that he really worked hard on his catch and his pass blocking or his pass protection and his hands. We just never got to see it because obviously when you have Spencer Ware, Charkandrick West, Jamal Charles, you're just never going to see that. But I think this was an excellent move for Green Bay. And I could be going out on a limb here, and I think everybody's going to be rushing the waiver wire this week to pick up Jay Ajayi, who we'll talk about in a second, who had over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns this week. But if I'm putting my money on anybody, I'll put it on Nile Davis all day, because who the hell else is even competition for him right now? He could have that backfield to himself for the next month. And to be honest, and they've already had their bye week, so that's not an issue. So if that's the case, there's nobody else there. Jay Ajayi has a ton of threats to him. You still have Arian Foster, who whatever level of, he's going to be involved in that. Damian Williams is still getting touches, vulturing touchdowns. So, Ajayi certainly, I think, has RB2 appeal, but I think it's going to be so hit and miss, you're not going to be able to really guess when it happens. And I think Nile Davis, like I said, could be a legitimate 3-down back workhorse who gets 20 touches a game in a Green Bay offense, who has struggled, but is still Green Bay. And like I said, I want Nile Davis, not Jay Ajayi.
All right, yeah, good point there. Ajayi has plenty of other people in that backfield to compete with. Nile Davis has nobody. Ty Montgomery, maybe, who we'll talk about a bit more later. Aaron Rodgers, I think, Jen, the expectation for him is pretty much what Matt Ryan's been doing, right? I mean, Matt Ryan has 2,000 yards already, and then this is what we've come to know from Aaron Rodgers. So the fact that he's not doing that, I guess, is what has people worried. He has 3 games out of 5 under 20 fantasy points, too, which isn't what you expect for what you probably had to pay to get him. But if you're listening to our show on a weekly basis, you wouldn't have paid that to get him. So
true. I think, I just looked up Jordy, and for what you're probably paying for him, I feel like he's lived up to that. Maybe it's not what people expected, but also people expect him to go down with a knee injury. So, he's a top 15 wide receiver right now. So for what people probably paid for him, far as I think what we're pointing to is that when you watch it, sometimes good football or bad football doesn't necessarily mean bad fantasy. And so I looked at the past 2 weeks. Cobb scored decently, Nelson scored decently, and so did, besides last week, Rodgers scored decently for people. And maybe not at the levels that you want and that people need right now because there's lots of underperformers. But, I think if Nile Davis steps in, like Kevin said, and is successful, I think we could see them bounce back.
Well, I think the problem too with wide receivers right now is wide receivers as a whole are struggling. There's only 21 wide receivers who are averaging more than 10 fantasy points per game. And then if you look at running backs, there's 21 in standard leagues that are averaging more than 10, and 26 in PPR that are averaging double-digit figures on a weekly basis. So to say that the guy's top 15 is, I mean, that's not obviously terrible compared to what we're talking about, but like it's also not like when you look at the numbers, like Julio Jones is number one, like by almost 20-point margin, according to Fantasy Pro or Pro Football Focus. I'm sorry. But if you look at running backs, like he's 40 points behind the RB1. And like you have to get down to like 5 or 6 to get down to his range. So like the running backs are out lapping the field in terms of against the wide receivers right now. So, but we'll probably get into that a little bit more later. I just thought that was very interesting.
Yeah. It's a good plug for who to put in your flex, but people have to play their wide receivers. So I'd play Nelson.
Speaking of bad football, guys, Carolina Panthers were in the Super Bowl last year. They're 1-5 this year. Also, Carson Palmer. What the hell happened? He had a meltdown in the playoffs last year, and the meltdown has continued. It has not gone away. He's still melting.
Well, see, if you would have listened to me in the preseason whenever we were talking about all this stuff, and I told you, especially when we were doing our predictions show, the last podcast before the season started, when I said that don't be surprised if Carson Palmer fails to meet expectations, I guess I was right, but I don't know. Like, I think he's just fallen off a cliff. I think he's Peyton Manning now, and he just doesn't look right. I don't know if there's an injury there. We know a few years ago when he got hurt, there was reported of some nerve damage in his arm. I don't know if that's a problem, and we just haven't heard about it yet. So, like, I don't know. Like, he just doesn't look right. The offense looks terrible as a whole. Thank God for David Johnson in that offense because they would be nowhere without him because that man deserves some sort of award, and they need to pay him now because that dude has just beasted out all year, and and he is the only reason they're even in this.
Agreed. You just watch him, and his accuracy is off. I mean, Larry Fitzgerald, that I once believed, I swear, that there was just like a magnet in his hands, and he just catches everything, and he can't even catch these balls that Palmer's throwing him, and he can't do the long ball accurately. It looks a mess, and David Johnson is the bright spot of it. I think you're 100% right there. And so they're relying on that now to keep him in it and his big playability, but everything else just isn't working.
Yep, missed another deep ball to John Brown, wide open John Brown yet again this past Monday night. Michael Floyd continues to lose playing time to Jerron Brown and J.J. Nelson for some reason. I'm sure that has something to do with it. David Johnson, like you guys said, if it weren't for him, that offense would be in trouble. Just guys kind of wanted to spin a little positive note on this too, though. A couple waiver options a couple weeks ago or last week, and maybe even still waivers this week that are blowing up. Cameron Meredith, 25 targets over the past 2 weeks. He is on fire. Devontae Booker. C.J. Anderson has been playing like crap. Gary Kubiak says he wants to get him more involved. All right, if he's still on the waiver wire, that could be an option. And, of course, we just talked before about Jay Ajayi. He exploded for over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. Is he for real is the question there. I can't answer it as a Dolphins fan, so I'd love to see if you can answer it as a fantasy fan. But, one more. I don't see him on the list, but Matt Ryan had a great game against Seattle. Wanted to kind of throw that out there because we've mentioned him the past 2 weeks now as being a guy who could see his numbers diminish because he had 2 very, very good defenses he was facing. And he kind of put the kibosh on that, kept it going.
I've been really proud of my Matty Ice. I mean, I called him as one of the most undervalued quarterbacks going into the season, and he has done me right. And I've been impressed. I dropped my quarterbacks and picked him up in at least 2 leagues earlier this season, and he's done me right since then. And he continues to impress. So I'm sticking with him.
Yep.
Yeah. He just continues to and now it's over. Like that. This was kind of the stretch run where we were really nervous about, and like, you know, as fantasy owners and things like that. But he is, other than, I mean, he wasn't as dominant in the Denver game, but like the Carolina game before, but we knew that Carolina's defense was, you know, just absolutely awful. And then, now it's going to Seattle, where obviously, a very tough place to play. And just, again, just lit it up. And to be honest, I've never seen a PI call that was so big. But that Julio Jones non-call was awful. I don't even know what. But anyway, that's another conversation for another day. But, yeah, Matt Ryan's been a beast. He's still number one quarterback in fantasy and just, making everybody look smart. And was a guy you probably could have got off waivers because he wasn't drafted in most leagues. So, as for Cameron Meredith, though, he's a guy that I've been on for the last couple of weeks. I don't think I'm selling him. It really depends on what you could get for him, to be honest. Everybody has a price. And if somebody offers you something stupid for him, then, yeah, I'll by all means. But in a PPR league especially, dude is just eating right now. And it's getting to a point now, though, because, like the first week, it was kind of like, okay, we kind of see this from time to time from players, but can it be sustainable? Like this week, they were drawing plays up for him. Like they were, doing bubble screens and all sorts of other things for him. Like it's clear that they want him to be a big part of this offense now. And it's almost to Alshon Jeffrey losing targets. But if it's me, I probably would hold Alshon Jeffrey, Cameron Meredith. But I would actually try to be buying Alshon Jeffrey because I think his price is very low right now, and he's too good of a wide receiver to be held down this long. I think it's just a poor start for him, and I think he's actually something that could be had cheap and could really pay off.
You mentioned Matt Ryan's schedule. He's past the hard games. Could not be more true. Versus San Diego and Green Bay at home the next two games, a place where he plays absolutely awesome. He's much better at home than he is on the road, which is hard to believe because he just went to Seattle and threw for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. Then a game at Tampa Bay and then at Philadelphia before the bye week. Philly, the hardest defense, I would say, out of the 4 there, but even they have been beatable, which I want to talk about a little bit more later. As for Cameron Meredith, super hyped about Kev pointing him out because I managed to pick him up, and I'm playing him, and I'm loving every second of it because this guy's getting targeted to the moon and back, and he is scoring a ton of points. So good call on you. And if you want to trade him, just if you think that's impossible, last year I had Stephon Diggs after his big 2-game run, traded him for LaShawn McCoy. LaShawn McCoy brought me to a championship last year because of that. So don't think it's not possible. Go out there. If you don't think Cam can keep it up, see what you can get for him.
Oh, sure.
And so, guys, speaking of these waiver options, for people who did not get the waiver options, there are still plenty of people who are very little owned who should probably be considered this week. They have great matchups this week. They've been performing very well. I see names on here that we've been saying over and over and over again the past few weeks. At what point do some of these guys become not streaming options anymore, but actually become every week starters? Quarterback, Brian Hoyer, Kev. He's on here again. You like his matchup against Green Bay this Thursday night, I take it.
For sure. I mean, it's the Green Bay Packers are a funnel defense that we keep talking about. Now Sam Shields was put on the IR today, so there's no hope there. If it were to turn out to be a shootout, which I don't know, like the Bears their defense has been playing well above their talent level right now. I mean, they have just week in and week out, you keep no, you got to target the Bears, and the Bears, make you look like an idiot because they keep shutting teams down. But Brian Hoyer is a legit fantasy option right now. 4 straight games of 300 yards, especially if you're in a league where you get bonuses for things like that. I mean, he has just hit. I mean, he did not. I believe he didn't have a touchdown this week, but I mean, other than that, I mean, he has been fantastic so far through all this, and this really shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody. And to be honest, I wonder if people could go back in time, if the Texans could go back in time, if they would have done things a little differently and kept Brian Hoyer over Brock Osweiler, because there is no doubt in my mind that Brian Hoyer is a better quarterback than Brock Osweiler. And
they gave Brock Osweiler a much better supporting cast too. Who did Brian Hoyer have last year?
DeAndre Hopkins, and that was it.
That was it. Alfred Blue was the running back. The wide receiver too? I don't even know. I don't remember. Was it Nate Washington? Cecil Shorts? I mean, geez.
I know, it's insane. And So, I don't know. Like, this is the ultimate, like, Matt Flynn move by the Texans. You know, they had all the pieces. They thought they were going to go for it. And you should always be skeptical if a team does not re-sign, a quarterback. Always, because, like I said, we've seen it so many times. Like I said, Matt Flynn, where he just blows up, has a couple games, and the next thing you know, teams are falling over themselves to sign him, and then it blows up in their face.
Who would have thought that Trevor Siemian was going to be a better quarterback than Brock Osweiler? I mean, listen, not that I think that Brock Osweiler is a world beater. He hasn't played that awful this year, but he certainly hasn't played like a guy that is supposed to lead this franchise to the promised land. That's for damn sure. Jen, I see a few more other names on the list here. You're going to go with one of these guys, or you have somebody else in mind?
No, I'll go with somebody on the list because I think he does need to be talked about as Winston. And I think people have been scared off of him. He faced two tough defenses the past 2 weeks. He had Denver and Carolina. And, he had that horrible game against Arizona the second week. So I think people have been a little scared. He's got 2 monster games, and I think this is a week against San Fran that he's going to bounce back and have a good week for you. In general, San Francisco has given up 14 most fantasy points to the QB position. It gave a monster game up to Cam earlier this season, but then, over 20 fantasy points to Dak. And also Tyrod Taylor last week. So I think with the weapons that he has, if he's still on your waiver wire, you need to be picking him up. Don't be afraid, especially this week. Plug him in, especially if you need some streaming options with bye weeks going on.
I couldn't agree more. Jameis Winston's not just a streaming option. He's a waiver add-on, and to pray you get him, because his schedule is absolutely cake. Like, the next 4 weeks are just absolutely fantastic. Oh, yeah, and he gets the Saints twice in the fantasy playoffs, week 14 and 16 in the championship. Sign me up for all the Jameis Winston. People, like you mentioned, were afraid of him. He had those couple good weeks, and he does have 11 interceptions on the season, which is obviously a big issue. However, the schedule really, really lightens up for them, and I think that you fire him up and feel great about it because, like I said, his schedule, I think outside of like 1 or 2 weeks is a little suspect, but other than that, he is going to eat. And Doug Martin, I don't know if he's going to play again this week. I think the thought was that he was going to play. Everyone was all excited about it. Doug Martin's going to be awesome. Charles Sims is out. But Doug Martin's still not practicing, so that's a bad sign, which sucks because we saw just how bad San Francisco is against the run. So anyways, love that call. Jameis Winston is not just a streaming option, but a real hold.
Absolutely. Oakland, Atlanta, and Chicago the next 3 weeks after San Francisco. And I think it's solid. I'm glad you pointed that out. New Orleans twice in the fantasy playoffs. I don't know how you can get something better. So if he's still on the waivers, you need to snag him and keep him.
When he gets Doug Martin back, he'll be even better. Hopefully it's this week. I have a lot of Doug Martin shares myself. How about Hunter Henry, guys? How freaking good is Hunter Henry? This is unbelievable. I mean, this is, the ageless wonder Antonio Gates is on this team. Hunter Henry's not supposed to come in and do any work. He's not supposed to score touchdowns. He's a rookie tight end. Rookie tight ends don't score touchdowns in fantasy. What is going on?
I don't know. I only said it all offseason, and Antonio Gates is washed. He's spent. He's done. He never should have came back. And people told me I wasn't right, that Antonio Gates is going to eat and he's going to have a lot of touchdowns, and that just hasn't happened. He looks like an old tight end is what he looks like. And Hunter Henry is the real deal. Like, what he's doing right now is absolutely amazing. You just don't see this out of rookie tight ends. Generally, it takes 2 to 3 years for a tight end to really kind of get a grasp of things in the NFL, learn pass blocking and things like that. But he has been, he's been their best option through the last few weeks. He's been better than Travis Benjamin, who continues to fail, and I think somebody you could probably drop now. Tyrell Williams, who, he's had a week and then a inconsistent week. But Hunter Henry continues to ball, and if he's available, I don't know how. Because I looked it up last night. I was like, no way, he's not available. I don't have to look. Wait, he's only owned in, I think it was 35 or 40% of Yahoo leagues. What is this?
37 right now.
How is that possible? Mm-hmm. And
I don't know. He scored a touchdown in the past 3 weeks. He's up against Atlanta this week. It gives up the 3rd most fantasy points to tight ends. I have absolutely no idea, Kev. I thought the same thing. I'm like, how are we talking about Hunter Henry again? Because people aren't listening and they're not picking him up. I don't know why. They need to go do it. The good news is he's still probably there for you. Snag him if you can.
I think a lot of people got it. So, like when Antonio Gates was out, people picked him up, and I think everybody jettisoned him once Antonio Gates come back because they think, "Oh, Antonio Gates is back. He's going to lose his role. He's only going to get a few touches, and that's it." And so everyone dropped him, and then obviously he made them pay dearly for that because, like I said, 80 yards and a touchdown I think this last week. So he's doing it all. He's getting the yardage. He's not just touchdown dependent tight end like so many of these guys are, and he is weekly now tight end 1 for the foreseeable future.
Mm-hmm.
If you're unable to get Hunter Henry, who's another guy that may be more easily obtainable for this week and has a good matchup?
Cameron Brate. We just talked about Jameis Winston. Now with Vincent Jackson, tore ACL on the IR, done for the year. That makes it just even better for Cameron Brate. More targets to go around. I believe we've talked about Adam Humphries. I think he also – so – I love Cameron Brate. Cameron Brate's been continually gotten targets, and I feel great about his upside. And I think he's going to continue to see probably in a range of 7 to 10 targets a week. And with that, for a tight end, you'll take that all day. And I think he's another guy who's going to be a viable tight end 1, along with, like I said, the Adam Humphries of the world, which is sneaky because I know Anthony has liked him, and I believe he's talked about him in the past. But he's another guy that's going to see a substantial uptick in targets now with Vincent Jackson to the IR.
It was my best of the rest choice not too long ago. All right, guys, one more position for the streaming options here, and that is the defense and special teams units. It's almost getting tougher and tougher to make a call on these with so many high-scoring games, and just the defenses is really not getting it done lately. So you guys took the task of putting together a few options here for this week. Who's your go-to option in leagues where you still have a defense?
For me, it's this week Baltimore that is playing. Hold on, I just had it pulled up. Oh, the Jets. So they've given up the most fantasy points to defenses across the board. I think we know why. Little Fitzmagic. And Decker gone, and they just can't get anything going. I mean, if you watched them, they're falling apart, basically. I'm wondering if they're looking at Geno Smith and kind of thinking, should we give this guy a try? But either way, I think playing Baltimore, who is owned in, 35% of Yahoo leagues, so that, chances are that they're still available. They maybe got dropped after that poor performance against Oakland in week 4. But this week, I think they're definitely a streamable option for you, especially against the Jets.
Speaking of the Oakland Raiders, I don't know if I'm crazy or not, but I kind of like the Raiders this week as a streaming option against Jacksonville. It seems rough because the Raiders are I think they're 26th overall right now in terms of fantasy defenses. They've been awful, no denying that. However, Blake Bortles he's already thrown 7 interceptions. The Jaguars are top 10 in turnovers and sacks surrendered per game to opposing defenses, which is obviously a big plus. So I would be targeting them. And then, like I mentioned, Oakland is 26th overall among defenses right now. However, they do have 2 top 10 finishes this year. I do think they're going to be able to turn over Blake Bortles. And I like I said, would I be shocked? Is it a very risky move? Absolutely, because you're playing Oakland, and Oakland has not really shown much sign of being able to stop teams. However, Blake Bortles has continued to turn over the football. And with that makes obviously great news for any fantasy defense. And so that's why I would take a shot on the Oakland Raiders.
All right, Baltimore versus either Ryan Fitzpatrick or Geno Smith. Either way, it's going to be a good play there. And then a bit of a sneaky surprise pick here with the Oakland Raiders versus the Jacksonville Jaguars by Kev. Hey, man, stranger things have happened this year, not this week. Maybe this week, too. But like you said, there's been a lot of turnovers there, a lot of sacks there. A pretty good opportunity to get yourself a sneaky play there with the Raiders. So if you missed your chance on your top waiver selections, maybe you did not have enough of your fab budget left, maybe you did not have a high enough waiver priority, and you lost out on everybody. Doom and gloom raining down on your team. You have nobody left to play this week. Don't worry. Best of the rest is coming up right now. Kev, I see a name on this list that I have never, ever heard before in my life, and I feel like I know everybody in the league, but I've never heard of Kenneth Farrow. What's going on with this guy?
Well, I mean, he's the backup running back to Melvin Gordon, so he's looked good. I remember I've seen him over the preseason. He looked pretty damn good. He would be a guy that would fill in. I mean, when you look at the San Diego backfield right now, if something were to happen to Melvin Gordon, then I mean, who else is going to be the guy? And I think that's the situations that we should be looking at right now in fantasy football is, you know, the what happens to this guy. A lot of the standalone value, you know, handcuffs are probably already been picked up. So now is the time to kind of look for that Zach Stacy, if you will, of a few years ago, of a guy who could really come out of nowhere where everyone's like, who's this guy? And I think that's Kenneth Farrow. I really like his upside. I think, like I mentioned, with if something were to happen to Melvin Gordon, Dexter McCluster certainly wouldn't fill in as the lead back. I think that would be Kenneth Farrow. He's getting a very, very small amount of touches. But let's be honest, too, like Melvin Gordon is completely touchdown dependent because he's not doing a whole lot. But I digress. If something were to happen to Melvin Gordon, then Kenneth Farrow would be a really good bench stash. He's not something that would run out in like a 10-team league or something like that. But if you're in a deeper format with a deep bench, Kenneth Farrow is definitely worth a stash.
Note that down here in my little notebook, my handy-dandy notebook. Kenneth Farrow, San Diego Chargers. So, Jen, I see a familiar name here. Tag for you, wide receiver for the Tennessee Titans. What do you got to tell us about Rashard Matthews?
I mean, he scored a touchdown the past 2 weeks. He's maybe a little bit more value in standards versus PPR because he's not getting a lot of targets, but what he is doing is catching the targets that he's getting and then making the most out of them. So he's got 100% completion rate the past 3 weeks. You know, three weeks ago it was 2 for 2, 4 for 4 2 weeks ago, and then 3 for 3 last week. And like I said, so the yards aren't necessarily huge. The highest he's gotten is like 82 yards, and he got 70 last week. But like I said, maybe a little bit touchdown dependent. But great flex play this week. They're playing Indianapolis. Mariota has gone off the past 2 weeks. And so I think this is they finally got some chemistry going. And I know there's a lot of weapons there, but I think this could be another good week. Definitely a flex play. And he is only owned in 20% or less of leagues. I think it's 7% in ESPN and 20% on Yahoo. I think most people, as he struggled, dropped him. And now's the time to maybe snag him when bye weeks are coming or your wide receivers are underperforming and to plug him in. I think this is the week to do it.
You and I were big fans of Rashard Matthews this offseason. Really thought he was going to have a much bigger role in this offense. But then again, we also thought that this Tennessee pass defense was going to be a little bit better than it has been. But like you said, Mariota, been doing good. Past 2 weeks, he showed up. He's put up points. His receivers are benefiting. I mean, how about that, too? He's got, you said 4, 3, and 2. Was that 8?
Yep. That's 9.
9 for 9 over the past 3 weeks. That's pretty incredible. So hopefully he'll keep it up and keep it going. I would love to see him succeed. Former Dolphin there. I like to root for those guys. But I don't know. Call me crazy.
You're rooting for the touchdown, but he's getting the looks, so.
Absolutely. I have another receiver actually I'm going with. We're going to go back to Green Bay, and I'm going to discuss some Ty Montgomery. Why am I talking about Ty Montgomery? Well, Devontae Adams, he's out. We talked about it earlier. He's in a concussion protocol. What if he's not out? Okay. You know who the backup running back is in Green Bay? It's Ty freaking Montgomery. They have not picked up another running back, people. I'm telling you. They are depending on Niall Davis and Ty Montgomery to carry the load here. Last week, he had 6 rushing yards, 10 receptions, 10, mind you, 98 receiving yards, and 64 return yards. He did lose a fumble as well, unfortunately. This guy is involved in the Green Bay offense. He has a tough matchup this coming Thursday against Chicago's defense, which has been playing very well. but he's going to be involved in every facet of the game. So if you need somebody to come in and fill a roster spot right away, get you some points, I like Ty Montgomery to do that. Only owned in 2% of leagues on Yahoo.
You know, it's funny with Ty Montgomery. People had actually talked about him. Was there any chance that the Packers could actually convert him to a running back? And now he's actually doing it. Because, I mean, he is a good – I mean, he's 6 foot, 216 pounds. So, I mean, he makes sense as a running back, 4.5 speed and things like that. So, he's actually a very interesting play, especially in PPR leagues. I think you have to be really a very, very sneaky play this week.
Yeah, 10 receptions last week. Who saw that coming? Nobody.
Well, I mean, the way they utilize them, but I don't think it's going to stop. And I think, like we talked earlier with Niall Davis, and not being a strong pass catcher, I think you see Niall Davis as the first and second down back, and then I think you're going to see a lot of Ty Montgomery out of the backfield.
All right, so that was your best of the rest for Week 7. Kevin covered Kenneth Farrow, the backup running back to Melvin Gordon there, as a deep stash in deeper leagues or deeper rostered leagues. Jen talked about Rashard Matthews, wide receiver over there in Tennessee. Caught a touchdown in each of the past 2 games. Mariota is on fire. His value definitely on the rise. And I just discussed Ty Montgomery, who is taking over for Devontae Adams with him being out, also playing a little backup running back there in Green Bay. Aaron Rodgers is his quarterback. That's always a plus. So 3 solid options there for you if you don't get your waiver targets. So, Kev, this week you texted me. You said, hey, I got an idea. This isn't unusual, people. This happens every single week. So this idea, though, I actually liked. So I'm sure he was expecting some backlash. And he was like, God, I got to text Anthony and tell him about this new idea. And he's going to text me back, will you stop changing stuff? But no, I did not. I like the idea. And that is talking about trends and breaking nonsensical ideas. Ideas about teams that simply aren't true, or maybe were true earlier in the year, and then they've improved on that, but they still get a bad rap for it because overall – say their pass defense is still ranked horribly, or say their run defense is still ranked horribly despite holding their past 2 or 3 opponents to next to nothing. So, Kev, I'll let you kind of roll into this a little bit. I have a few teams I want to talk about who haven't been living up to the standard that they set in the beginning of the season, but your topic, you're the lead, buddy.
So for me, I think for me, like I when I started thinking about this, and then I started going further down the rabbit hole, and one thing that I think that bothers me is on a weekly basis, how often do we see rankings, for example? Like you see, it's like almost cookie cutter that you're going to see the same players every damn week at the top, right? And a lot of it makes sense because they are the best players in the league and they're top performing guys, but then there are certainly weeks that they shouldn't be. And not every week does Antonio Brown or Odell Beckham or Julio Jones finishes a top 5 wide receiver. But it's like we're so damn afraid to do something a little different and drop a guy down. Like, for example, this week in my rankings that I'm setting up now, I actually have Aaron Rodgers as QB 13 right now. And I know people are going to say, wow, that's crazy. How can you have him outside of your top 5? Like everybody has him in their top 5 every week. Well, here's the thing. He's not a top 5 scorer every week. But people are so afraid to play matchups and understand that, hey, this guy's not going to have a great week every week. Sure, it's going to burn you sometimes because of Julio Jones last week. If you would have dropped him down to a more realistic expectation, and obviously he went off. He was one of the best fantasy wide receivers of the week last week. And that's what those guys do. But but as a savvy fantasy owner, you should take a look at rankings, but then don't put a whole lot of stock into them because they're so cookie cutter. You could go to most sites and see the same damn players listed in the same damn spots because everybody is so kind of like the sheep mentality. And I think it's the same thing among fantasy community in general. And like, I feel like a person could do much better in fantasy if there was no such thing as like Twitter. And I know this is probably terrible for us because we're on a podcast and things like this. And so it doesn't make a lot of sense, but like it's kind of like like I said, like the herd mentality. Like if somebody touts somebody, especially like an Evan Silva or a Matt Harmon or whoever, for example, and they tout somebody, and then it's like the collective community, like just follows that lead towards that player without like doing research and things like that, or a lot of them do, and especially fantasy players mainly in this do that. And it irritates me because, like, we're wrong a lot, right? But then I just feel like nobody ever, like, there's few and far between where people have the balls enough to go against the grain on things. And like I said, with rankings, it's the same thing. Like, if you look at the rankings every week, you see the same top 5 players for the most part in each position. Some rightfully so, some shouldn't. Some should be dropped down dramatically because of matchup and things like that. But you never see it because most people will not go out on that limb to do so.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you basically just made the argument for why I do the undervalued and the overvalued, because you look at the rankings, they're very similar. They're not moved around a lot. And so there's guys where you should probably be playing other people over them, or you shouldn't be playing them, at least with these expectations that they're going to go off. So that you have to kind of look at the relative stuff and move it around. And I completely agree that I think if you look around, most rankings look very similar, at least at the top, on a week-to-week basis, and we know that the production level does not match that. The fantasy results don't match that at the end of the week, but that's not really talked about.
I get burnt by this very thing every single week with my Studs and Duds article. Every single week, I'm falling into the trap of, man, he's playing Atlanta. He's going to be great this week. Or he's playing Oakland. He's going to throw for 5,000 yards this week. And for more often than not, it's probably true. But sometimes you just got to take a step back and look at the situation. So this week, I've been taking an even closer look for my article. Teams that are ranked very high in pass defense, 2 teams, Houston and Philadelphia, both ranked as top 10 against pass defense in fantasy football. Philadelphia has let up 440 yards passing and 5 touchdowns the past 2 games through the air. But you wouldn't know that just by looking at the rankings, because they did so well beforehand that Philadelphia's defense looks like it's still the second or third best defense against the pass. Sometimes you got to dig a little deeper because those rankings that Kev talks about just are lying to you. Mm-hmm. Absolute lying. Houston Texans, 520 yards, 3 touchdowns through the air these past 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm. After they lost Watt, I think people underestimated how much that was going to hurt them. And they just haven't been the same.
Oh, absolutely. But then there's also situations, right, where, and we talked a little bit about this at the beginning of the show, but the whole mentality of not benching your studs, which of course is a little tongue-in-cheek when we talk about it, because sometimes there is good reason to, but then there's other situations where maybe not. Like, look at how the team does against other studs. So I did have a little example here. Arizona's run defense is the 5th best in the league for good reason. They have held most of their opponents to next to nothing. But they haven't been untouchable. When they faced LeGarrette Blount week 1, they let up 70 yards and a touchdown. He had like 5 yards per carry. LaShawn McCoy went off for $110 and 2 touchdowns. And then just 2 weeks ago, Carlos Hyde, of all people, had 78 yards and a touchdown against them. Some teams are beatable. They just got to have the right person facing them. Christine? I get it wrong every single time. I give up. Michael, the running back there in Seattle, plays Arizona this weekend. I'm not hesitating. Starting him 100%. Don't overthink it. Start him against Arizona.
Mm-hmm. We talked about this, that it's a good tool to use. You get on Yahoo, which is a platform that many fantasy players use. They light up green, red, and yellow, and you think, oh, they hit game day decision and they got stars for you. But if you click on it and look at what Anthony's saying, the breakdown of what they've given up and how tough they've been over the past several weeks and who that was against, you can get a better sense. And it's not as skewed as if somebody scored a ton of points on them like week 2, and then they've actually held them the past few weeks, or, did really well against one of their studs. But people aren't looking at that. They're just looking at the overall stats, and it's misleading, I think, some people to play certain players over others, when really, if you did just a little bit more research, you could probably choose and be more confident in your plays.
And I'm going to, to be honest with you, I think, and this is, I don't know how to put this in a way that doesn't come out like I'm like bagging on anybody, because I'm not. But I will tell you this, and the on Fantasy Pros, where you'll find the ECR rankings and things like that, we're all in them. I'm actually involved in the actual ECR, and it's almost shocking, but it's not really, where you see like all the NFL.com guys, their rankings are always at the very bottom. Yahoo people, always at the bottom. ESPN guys, 99% of the time, they're at the bottom. Most of them aren't ranked highly and overall among all the rankings. And I just don't think, in my opinion, they don't have the time. I don't even know how to put it in a way. Like I said, I don't want to come out because that's not me. I don't like to like put anybody down, but like, it's just 9 times out of 10, those big sites, they're not very accurate at all. And I just always, like I said, and I think a lot of it's because a lot of people don't want to go out on a limb, and a lot of people don't want to, I hate to use this word, but I guess have the balls to make that sort of decision to lower somebody, even though it makes sense, but because they don't want to get it wrong, and they care more about getting it wrong than they do getting it right. And I think a lot of times that's the way that it plays out, and that's why those things like that do happen. And I don't know. It's interesting. So, but I don't know. But I mean, I'm at 41 right now overall, so that's not great. But among 140 experts, it's not bad. So,
I tell you what, though, I can feel their pain, because I mean, you got to admit, when we get on this show and we get on the Sunday show and we have our notes, we do our research, but something is going to be wrong. There is a feeling in the pit of my stomach where I don't want to let anybody else down. I don't want to tell you to start this guy and then have him suck. I'm going to feel a little bit bad about that. Now, it's not going to ruin my night. I'm not going to cry about it, but I am going to be a little more cautious the next time I go and make a prediction, because I don't want people to rely on my word and then it really just not do good for them. Like, I don't want to let them down. I think that's what you see. That's why people are so careful. It can be hard to be brash on a week-to-week basis.
No, and I see that, and like, not everybody gets things right. We all get things wrong. I mean, we've had, for example, like Matt Harmon on this show twice, and I guess we haven't really put it out there yet, but he is coming on again in November. And I mean, he's one of my favorite guys in the whole fantasy industry, just because of who he is and how nice he is of a person and things like that. But like, I mean, he's got things wrong this year. He kind of put out his perception. He loved Tyler Lockett, John Brown, Kamar Aiken. There was a lot of guys that I really liked. Bruce Ellington got hurt and just haven't worked out for him. But this is a tough game, and it really is hard to really try to predict. You're never going to get everything right. You hope to get more right than wrong, but it is tough because every week, I get tons of questions and I answer them all because that's what I do. And I never stop doing that because I feel like that's what I'm doing this for, is to help other people. It may be fantasy football, but it's still, I think it means a lot to a lot of people. And so I take a lot of pride in it. And it legit pisses me off if I get something wrong. I will go back and look at the things that I got wrong every week. And I'm like, damn it. Because I feel like I've let them down. Yes, it's their team. They need to make their own decisions. But I still feel like I played some part in that. And it is hard. And I think that's one thing, and within the fantasy community, that people just don't realize, that people just want to run and ask you a question. And I've had times where people will get mad, like you don't respond to them immediately, which irritates the hell out of me. Like, we're not real people who have lives and families and other things going on. Like, we're just supposed to be a drone at a computer waiting for questions so we can answer immediately. And I don't think many of us get much respect in the sense of what we do, and appreciation, I guess, for doing this. Most people, surprisingly enough, do this for free. There's a very small few that actually get paid to do this. But from the top down, I think the fantasy community in general is really probably the nicest that you'll find or come across. I think everybody legitimately wants to help everybody and see good things from people. And I think that's one thing that's overrated, or that's undervalued, I should say, not overrated, in the fantasy community.
Yeah, I've been meaning to ask you for a raise, by the way.
Yeah.
Nice.
Of course, we are a few of those who do this for free, but it's fun, man. It's a lot of fun. I enjoy it. So let's get we don't have a lot of time left, but I know we really wanted to touch on the zero running back versus zero wide receiver theory. We wanted to talk a little bit about it. Jen and I were actually talking about strategies before we got on the show, so I do want to talk about that PPR Listener League again, which I'm sure you hear me talk about every single week, but that team is freaking killing it, man. I bet you're talking to your friends about the teams that you're proud of, too, so I'm going to talk about that team again, but in general, though, the running backs have been dominant. The top tier of running backs, what do we have? The top 4 rounds of running backs have been pretty darn good. Whereas the top 4 rounds of receivers have been a bit underwhelming, which is a complete 180 from last season when we saw the running back position maybe in the worst state that it's ever been, ever, in fantasy football. I mean, to be a top 10 fantasy running back last year was not something to brag about at all. And the receivers were dominant. Now we have a little bit of a flip-flop. We're only 6 weeks in. What do you guys think? What does this mean so far? Will this continue? Will things balance out later on in the year? And, yeah, that's it.
I think to a certain extent it will. It's been pretty crazy so far, to be honest with you. Like, I know, like, we had talked about it over the offseason about, like, could this be like a running back renaissance this year? Does zero wide receiver, could that really be the game-winning strategy where it's sort of, the zig when everybody zags sort of mentality, I guess, to do something kind of contrarian, because that's how you win your league. You don't win a league doing everything what everybody else does, because then you're fighting the scraps from everybody else. And I feel like, honestly, through 6 weeks, you can make an argument that going zero running back or zero wide receiver, it was the way to go. I mean, obviously, there's instances where I could lead you down the path of saying, no, that's not accurate. You could have went wide receiver and been fine. You could have drafted DeMarco Murray in the 4th or the 5th, and you could have taken, a few like Kristen Michael later on or Matt Jones later on, and it would have worked out. But overall, I mean, David Johnson has been an absolute monster. He was a first-round pick. Ezekiel Elliott, everyone was so afraid, didn't really know what to do with him, didn't know what to believe of him, but he has been better than advertised, to be honest. So, I mean, there's so many of these guys who were early-round picks. LaShawn McCoy was a second-round pick. He's balling out. It's really been the opposite. And then on the other end of the spectrum with wide receiver, it's really been a lot of inconsistency. Julio Jones has been the best. And he's only at 90 fantasy points, which, like we mentioned earlier, would put him in 6th among the running backs and wide receiver group, because David Johnson in standard has 131, McCoy 110, Elliott 109, 105 for Murray, and 93 for Melvin Gordon. And then there's actually a drop-off past him when you get down further than that, past Julio. So it's really been just kind of a meh for wide receivers so far, especially the top guys. If you drafted heavy wide receiver and you didn't hit on a running back, you are probably not faring too well at the moment.
Absolutely. I'm sitting here looking at this roster now of the draft, right, for that PPR listener league. I'm surprised at how many of these guys I actually drafted. I thought I picked up some of these guys. Mike Wallace. Who the heck would draft Mike Wallace? Apparently I did. Even Terrell Pryor. It's crazy. But I kind of went with I was telling Jen before, I kind of just legitimately went with a best player available strategy in this league. I had David Johnson. I got him 5th overall, by the way. Thank you, people in this league. 4 receivers went first. It went receiver 1, 2, 3, 4. I got David Johnson in the 5th. It came back to me in the 20th pick. I got Gronkowski. I expected to take slack for that, but everybody actually was pretty happy about that I took him. They not happy because they wanted him, but weren't surprised by that. Then Mark Ingram, Latavius Murray. My first receiver was Tyler Lockett in the 5th round. Obviously not on my team anymore. I did get Drew Brees in the 7th. So my 3 starting receivers, Michael Thomas, who I drafted in the 8th round, Mike Wallace, who I drafted in the 12th round, Terrell Pryor, who I drafted in the 13th round. I am 5-1, and I scored 200 points this past weekend. I am flying high. I'm loving this team. I don't know. It doesn't really speak to a strategy for either of these, zero running back or zero wide receiver. It just so happens that I waited on receiver here because the best players available weren't receivers. But it is a good example of if you legitimately go with who you think is the best player available, regardless of position, you could end up with a heck of a roster. Of course, there's a lot of luck mixed in as well. Who would have thunk that those 3 receivers in particular would actually be doing this well at this point in the season?
Yeah. I agree. I think you've had an easier road if you went with the elite running backs. I mean, how many huge injuries have we really had? There was AP right in the beginning, right? And then Doug Martin is missing time now. But for the most part, if you drafted one in the 1st round, they've been pretty consistent for you, and you can't say that across the board for some of the wide receivers. I will say that I went with wide receiver heavy for most of my drafts. And I'm doing it's hit or miss. It really is. I was in our redraft TFA league. I'm doing horribly because I think I counted earlier with Anthony. I think my first 7 out of 8 guys have already missed time. I mean, including Keenan Allen, Decker's out, Rawls, Foster, Kevin White. So. But there's 2 other leagues where I did almost the exact same thing, just got different players, and I'm in second and third place. So it really just depends on who you took your chances on later in the draft, like we were talking about. And if you picked somebody up like Spencer Ware has saved me. Hill has really hurt me, so that was probably a pick I wouldn't make again. And getting some of those guys like Coleman that we talked about a lot before the season started, and getting those guys in later rounds have been the reason why I've been able to stay at the top. But some of my top picks have definitely made it harder for me to fight and stay at the top. And so if any one of them would go down, and if any of my running backs now, because the waivers are so slim, if any of them go down now, it's going to be really difficult. So regretting it a little bit.
There was definitely some value 10th rounder later, though. I mean, I'm looking at Kev's team here. He freaking killed it. 10th round, Tevin Coleman. 11th round, Ben Roethlisberger. 15th round, Terrence West. That's a haul right there right now. I mean, Roethlisberger just got hurt, but before the injury, I mean, that's crazy for 10th rounder later.
Well, I mean, I think overall, I think what it really paints the picture as is that we shouldn't be talking about a zero RB or zero wide receiver. I think either both of them are so flawed that they don't make sense. I think the best way to go is just best player available. Because I can paint a picture of the opposite direction as to why that wouldn't work. Because like I said, you could have taken Todd Gurley in the first round and then taken Eddie Lacy or Doug Martin, who's rightfully been hurt, or Mark Ingram, who's really struggled in the second. You could have taken C.J. Anderson or Thomas Rawls in the third and not taken LaShawn McCoy. Or you could have taken Carlos Hyde. Well, I guess Carlos Hyde's been all right. Latavius Murray, who's been very inconsistent and now hurt. Matt Forte, who started off great, has been terrible the last few weeks. John Stewart's been hurt. Jeremy Hill, broken up. It's over. That thing's done and over with. He is not a thing anymore. And DeMarco Murray has been an absolute monster. So I think all of those things, I think really, like I said, I think go into the – I think this is I know we're only 6 weeks through the season, but I think what this does is really paint the picture of that any strategy like that should be put to bed, because I think do your research, like we always say, and go with just the best player available or the best player for you that you have on your board at that time. Do not be like, well, I can't take this guy because of some stupid strategy, because neither one of them work. Like we said, we went all offseason. It was all about zero RB, zero RB, zero RB, zero RB. Everybody was talking about it. That's the strategy to go with. Screw running backs. And it's making a lot of people look very dumb. And there's a lot of people who are still trying to fight that battle of that's the way to go. And, well, I got this guy in this round, and I got these guys in this round, but are completely glossing over the fact of all the other players that were available earlier in the earlier, and acting like that it was viable. But there's no way to paint wide receivers early as really a smart move, because most of them, if you go through the list, have just been completely inconsistent. So. Yes, they've had monster weeks, but they've had some really bad ones too. Yes, 6 weeks in the season is not a big enough sample size, but it's enough to show you that, again, the only strategy you should go with is the strategy that you think of the best player you think is available at that moment.
It's a good time to talk about, not being afraid to cut your dead weight either. I mean, yeah, that team is doing great for me, but there was a lot of waiver action going on there for me to actually get a bench in this league, because, I drafted Tyler Lockett, Tyler Boyd, Laquan Treadwell, Jalen Strong. That's 4 receivers that I've already cut who are no longer on the team. So you can't be afraid to cut the dead weight. Don't hold on to him too long. Don't be, maybe he'll do it next week. If it doesn't look like it after 2 to 3 weeks, it's probably not going to happen. And, you could get bitten for that, of course, but I mean, for me, like if you're taking chances on guys already, you know you're taking a chance when you draft them. Don't continue to hold on to it. Don't be stubborn like that. Just let it go. Let it fly.
I guess to wrap up or put a bow on it, I guess, if you will.
Go on it.
Who's one guy right now that was a higher round pick? I'm not putting a number on it or a label on it. That you would drop right now.
A higher round pick that I would drop right now.
What round was John Brown? Because I am most likely dropping him. And I remember getting some opinions a few weeks ago, and I wish I would have just done it after his big game. But that made me waiver, and so I kept him, and I have regretted it. So he's going to be off of my teams. And I wish I would have picked up Meredith last week and dropped him. Now I'm going to have to fight for Meredith.
I would say one of the easier ones is probably Jeremy Langford. He was a first 5 rounds pick. I got rid of him.
Who else is early?
Is Jeremy Hill a droppable candidate?
Oh, God. It's hard because the amount of touches he gets, but...
He's not getting them anymore, though. The last 2 weeks, he's not even getting the touches anymore. He's not even a starter anymore. It almost appears that he's being phased out of the offense.
I'm just
I guess Gio Bernard has definitely been the better running back so far this year, just based on opportunity. Opportunity and production at this point. Not that he's getting.
I was gonna say he hasn't really been that great either. Neither one of them have done anything, and I think a lot of it is that teams are just bracket coveraging AJ Green and saying we're going to load the box and you're not going to run on us. I wouldn't drop Jeremy Hill. I own Jeremy Hill. I'm not going to be dropping him because I think running back is so volatile that it just doesn't make sense to drop a running back like that who has whatever upside he has left. And if something were to happen to Gio Bernard, then obviously he's the lead back there. And I think when Tyler Eifert returns, I think it will help him. But he's certainly somebody that I don't know. Like I guess that was a little like he's not probably something I would drop. But I think we're getting to a point now you should know what you're getting from a lot of guys. And really, you can make a decision on whether you should be keeping them or letting them go.
Matt Forte, you mentioned him. I think he's droppable. I mean, he hasn't had a double-digit score since when? You wouldn't drop him?
I know. It's so hard, right?
I know. I mean, right? We're also thinking, okay, what's on the waivers? Yeah, he's involved in the offense. He's getting touches, so you don't want to drop him if there's nobody there. But literally since week 2, he has not scored more than 10 points. He has not had a touchdown since week 2, and that's when he scored 3 in one game. So even if you look at his stats, it is just not good. And he's on an offense that is dropping. So I know it doesn't sound like something you'd want to do, but if there's somebody available that's up and coming and you're struggling, I mean, I know we're only 6 weeks in, but to make playoffs, if you're in the hole and you need to come out swinging, he's somebody I would drop to try and pick up somebody with some upside to get you back in the running, if you could even get back in it at this point. So,
what about Tyler Lockett?
I've already dropped him.
I dropped him too, yeah.
Tyler Lockett, it's so tough though, man, because if for me, I think we all have like a weakness in fantasy football, and mine is like when I draft them, they become like my little presents, and like I just love them and I care for them, and I just don't want to let them go and release them back into the wild, because I feel like as soon as I do, they are going to drop the hammer on me and they are going to just explode, and I'm gonna be like, what the hell was I thinking? And see that? I didn't say fuck, which I wanted to say fuck, but I didn't say fuck. But anyway.
Well, then you just said it 3 times. I know what you mean. I 100% know what you mean. And it's hard to, let's just take Lockett, for example, because this is what I went back and forth for at least a week and kept him longer than I probably should have, because you know his talent. But they just have not gotten him involved. He had that injury that must have lingered for a while and got in the way. And it's just, at some point you need to cut your losses. Bye week started to happen. And I just couldn't do it. Like I had to stay in the running, and he was dead weight. So he could have gone off the past 2 weeks. He has not, but he could have, and I ran that risk.
I still own Tyler Lockett in the league, that same league that I was talking about with how many receivers I have, which I would never start him outside of a bye week ever, because my receivers are so good. But, like, the other guy for me has been Philip Dorsett, and I don't know why that I can't just pull the trigger and be like, here, go. But, like, it makes so much sense. He's the number 2 wide receiver on the damn Colts, and, like, he hasn't done nothing. Now he's hurt. But, like, he's another guy that I've just not been able to just, like – I would tell anybody else if they asked me, would you drop Philip Dorsett? I'm like, yeah, drop him. Get rid of him. But, like, in my own head, I'm like, no, I can't do that. Like, what if he just goes off next week? And I'll be so angry at myself. And, like, so I end up holding guys too long, I guess. And, like, that's probably, like I said, that's probably my biggest downfall, I guess, fantasy football. I mean, I still do well and everything else. But, like, I just have problems with, like, guys that I draft that I, like, in the preseason I loved, like, letting go of. Sort of like Jeremy Hill, for example. You know, I've been holding on to that love for Jeremy Hill for too long. And, I you know, sometimes you just have to – you have to move on, you know. Maybe put on some, I don't know, put on your you know, Usher CD or something like that. I feel
like he's going to start.
Just let it burn. Well, I think Dorsett, if Moncrief coming back soon, we hope, right? Cross our fingers. I'm a Moncrief owner and have not dropped him. But I'm hoping that if you still can't cut the cord with Dorsett when he gets close, I'm hoping that you're able to do that because he's got to be dead weight.
I've done it this week. I got 3 waivers in this week, and I'm letting them all go and just letting them go free into their home. And I'm sure Tyler Lockett on Sunday night will just go off for 150 and 2 touchdowns, and I'm going to be screaming at everybody.
Yeah, but know that nobody else will have played him unless they're desperate, and that most likely the week after he wouldn't do it again. I really don't think it's going to happen. I wanted it, and it just isn't happening for him. It's just not happening.
I think my dead weight kryptonite has been Derrick Henry. I will do in my power to keep that man on the roster.
It's hard because he's a great handcuff, but he's not doing anything for you on his bench, and he has no standalone value.
Absolutely nothing right now, but I know if DeMarco Murray gets hurt, this dude is going to be fire. And there's no way I am cutting him. I will be there when if Murray goes down to have that running back, to have that handcuff. I have put in guys that I would never start in my life just because I did not want to cut Derrick Henry this year.
I think it's easier to hold a running back because of that, especially if they're the handcuff running back. Than it is like a wide receiver, because I think obviously they get far more opportunities to really showcase their talent, and when they're not producing, you're just kind of like, you know. And so it's tough. But like I said, like it's tough for me. I have a problem with doing it, and I just hold on to them and just never let them go. And so finally, I end up doing it. But like it's just I don't know.
Well, we're out of time now because of that.
Yeah, but it was a necessary conversation. I'm sure there's owners that are having these same conversations, and at this point, they need to be reassessing and letting some of these guys go.
It's therapeutic. We should have just put on some like a running stream, like a babbling brook, if you will, music. Yeah, and just kind of like we just talked it out a little bit. That's what that was for.
Hey, Kev, what does that look like?
It's just kind of letting it flow. I should have done a deep breathing relaxation technique for everybody. And then click the button. Just click the button. It's just a button. Click it and breathe. Click it and breathe. Walk away. Shut your computer down. Have a good night. And then you're like 3 a.m. Refresh. What did I do? Refresh. No.
All right, guys, this has been a lot of fun, but unfortunately, we do have to cut the cord on this episode. That'll do it for this episode of the Fantasy Authority Podcast, episode number 66. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we hope you'll come back for more. Don't forget, we have our Sunday show each and every Sunday, 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time, right up until kickoff. That is the TFA Game Day Podcast right here. That is the TFA Game Day Podcast live on YouTube. Head on over to YouTube, search the Fantasy Authority. You will see us pop up each and every Sunday. We also do the Tuesday show live if you'd like to see a behind-the-scenes look at the antics that go on during the recording of the show. Don't forget to show us some love on Twitter as well at FF_authority, and check out thefantasyauthority.com for tons of great articles each and every week. Check out our rest of season rankings, which has got to be the hottest thing we have on the website from a week-to-week basis. People love the rest of season rankings, so make sure you get over to the site, check that out, subscribe, rate, review, iTunes and Stitcher. I cannot emphasize that enough. We really appreciate any reviews you have for us. Lets us know that we are doing our job well. Or at least okay. That'll do it for Kevin Steele and Jennifer Smith. I'm Anthony Pinzone. This has been another episode of the Fantasy Authority Podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and have an awesome night, everyone.